Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Risking It All podcast. I'm joined by Brian as normal, usual co-host. I'm delighted to be joined by our guest this week, who's John Loudon.
Welcome, John.
Welcome, mate. Thanks for joining us. So John is the owner and founder of Hybrid Anchor, and he's also a business investor who's built up a wide portfolio of other marketing agencies, and we're absolutely buzzing to hear about how he's done it and how he got into, Hybrid Anchor and where it all began. So yeah, without further ado, take us back to your early days, John, and tell us about growing up and where you were at before you get into business.
Yeah, no problem. So I watched a few of the other episodes to see the kind of format of what you guys do. And then I thought, oh no, they're going to ask me about my childhood. It kind of feels like a therapy session. I'm like, not tell them this, or I'll tell them that. So I had a pretty standard upbringing. I had a mum and dad. My mum's very creative, so she's like a craft teacher, and, but also was a very traditional housewife. So it was kind of like a part-time job, if you could even call it that. Right. Worked a couple of weeks in Wolves, that kind of thing. But my dad's an engineer. So he works in oil and gas, so energy sector, so you guys will love that. But he works for Maersk, so he's an instrument technician. So for myself, I'm kind of like a blend of the both of them. So I'm very creative, but also very sort of engineer, sort of thought process, how things work. I'm fascinated by that. My dad would always say to me, you're not an engineer, look at your hands, you're not a proper engineer. So there is a distinction between engineers that work with their hands and engineers that do what we do for a living, push pens. But yeah, in school wise, didn't really do well at school. Could barely read, could barely write. Entrepreneurial story, isn't it? Like how many of us are dyslexic and we struggle that way. But one of the kind of big differences about my childhood was because my dad's dad was actually a computer engineer, and think about back to when computers were like a full room.
Aye.
Like a byte was a Frankenstein sign, like, pull the lever. That was what it was. So he's always had a computer, and I was basically born with a PC, which is a huge advantage when you think about it. Like our kids now, that's kind of how I grew up, where a computer was always there. I was 8 years old when I first got Photoshop, and I've used it every single day since. So I've either been drawing or Photoshop since then. I'm now 37, so racked up quite a lot of time on it. And I kind of always knew what I wanted to be. Well, originally I wanted to be a Disney animator, but reality kicked in, and I thought, they've went 3D. There's no future in that. Graphic design it was, and then I pivoted into wanting to be a graphic designer from 8.
What school did you go to? Where are you from?
So originally from Coatbridge, still live in Coatbridge actually, so it's kind of a bit like the Truman Show, I've always lived in that one area. I didn't really like living there when I grew up. I kind of wanted to live somewhere else. We could have lived really anywhere because my dad worked offshore. But I'm kind of happy in a way that that's where we are, because I think it keeps you grounded. That's the area where you grew up, that's where your friends are from. And I think everybody needs a bit of that, You can kind of like move location and reinvent yourself. And I quite like the fact it's, you're still having lunch or a pint or a catch up with your mates.
And folk for Coatbridge won't let you forget where you've came from.
Exactly. I mean, we can't travel much with ankle bracelet and stuff, I managed to get to Bridgeton today, but it's,
What school did you go to?
So I moved around a lot when I was younger. So I've went to maybe 4 or 5 primary schools. Very disruptive child. Had to get resettled. I think that's probably why I'm hyper socialised actually. High school wise, I went to St Ambrose, which is like a high school there in middle of Coatbridge next to Blair Hill Station, although it's moved now. They knocked it down after I left, made a message on that. So yeah, I went there. By the 4th year, pretty much my teachers were encouraging me to leave, like, you should maybe just leave now. And I'm like, you want rid of me? I'm not surprised though. So I kind of thought, right, I've got a choice here. I need to either choose whether I want to do a job or I want to go to college. They'd done this kind of like visitor day, so you can go up to Motherwell College, it was. Right. And you got like, painter decorators course, creative arts, like multimedia web design course. And I was thinking, they use Photoshop here, they use Corel Draw. I know all this software, this is great. And I'm thinking, so is this actually a course? Can I study this? Yeah, you can study that, no problem at all. So done my interview there to basically join the college as a student. And I didn't really have any grades, so they're pretty much like, you're going to struggle majorly. But what we'll do is we'll give you a chance. Your portfolio is really strong. and that's unusual. So why don't we give you a chance? And if it doesn't work out, we can always slide you back to an NQ.
Right.
So when I was kind of joining this course, I'm thinking, oh, please don't let me slide back to the NQ. That's the only thing I focused on. I was more focused on that than getting my grade.
Yeah,
Just like, please don't let me slide back to the NQ. But being young and naive, I was only like 15, coming up for 16 sort of thing. I then got a job interview for Fast Signs in Airdrie. So it's like a signage company.
Right.
And that sort of convinced me that maybe I should work instead of, go and do training. That kind of, I could earn money while I learn.
Right.
Sounded all right.
Right.
A couple of weeks into that job, I'm not even kidding, guys. I am a proper straight up pen pusher, right? And I don't think I'm soft, but honestly, my hands were like something out of Stigmata or something. So to put it in perspective, we used to peel the lorries, right? So you'd peel the sticker off the lorries and then you'd be methylated spirit to clean the lorry down and then put the new sticker on it. And your job during the day was like weeding, which was pulling all the vinyl off of the letters. So you had hundreds of nicks all over your hand, methylated spirit in there, no skin in the bottom of your hand.
Right.
And I thought, I really need to contemplate my life choices here.
And what was the job titled then when you took it?
I was a sign writer, but the idea was, I'll train you to be a great designer. You will be a senior designer. So it was saying all the right things that I wanted to hear. But basically, I had a bit of a kind of breakdown. I thought, I've made a major mistake here. What did I do? So I phoned the college and I was just like, I've changed my mind. I'd like to come in the course after all. Please take me back. I think it sounds like a great opportunity. Just like, is there still a seat for me? You've not filled it or anything, have you? And they're going, no, we'll still give you a chance. But as we said, if it doesn't go well for you kind of thing, we'll maybe put you in the NQ, which was their way of supporting. They weren't doing it to be bad. As it turned out, it was actually one of the top students there, so I had 7 merits in my first year, but I lived it. Like, design for me was my life. I didn't do anything else other than that.
And what was your college course? Was it graphic design?
So I studied internet, multimedia, digital design and development, which is a big confaffled sort of course name, but basically it's the perfect kind of foundation for what we do. So you've got design, you've got video editing, you've got sound engineering, you've got the legalities of copyright and project management, design, all these different subjects rolled up into a nice wrapper. And then I could basically pick what I wanted to do after that. So I thought, I actually think even to this day, I've advised the SQA about future kind of creative skills, and I'm like, you should go back to doing multimedia, because see the way the world is now, that's probably one of the hottest skill sets to have, because you can turn your hand to anything almost.
I mean, in our sphere of marketing, digital marketing in particular, having somebody with that multi-skill set would huge advantage.
I was actually at the college not too long ago at a networking event, get sat next to the guy for the college, had a bit of a blather. He was asking me questions about who I was and what I did and whatever, and just get talking a bit about digital marketing. And I was saying to him, is there like a course that you've set up that students can sign up to for future life in environments like digital marketing? And he was like, no, really, to be honest. And I was quite taken aback in kind of today's modern world that there wasn't really an option for anything like that. But we've noticed how difficult it is, like, to grow our team and get the right talent in the door, because it's like you Frankenstein skills together almost.
So
there isn't that end product. It doesn't exist. It's like they've got 30% of what you need, so you go, right, cool, that sound, we'll work with that and just pile on the other 70% through upskill and whatever. But I've lost my train of thought there. I know
what you're
point
getting
was,
at.
but
as far as like a digital marketing course, there's not really too much out there. I've seen ones in town and colleges and that, but it's not widely available. I've got a random question for you, right?
Yeah,
this is reaching into the memory a wee bit, right? So obviously you said you've lived your life with a computer kind of kicking about, right? So do you remember what the first computer was that you ever used? Like,
I certainly do, yeah.
Adobe or whatever on?
So I had an Amiga 54, which is, I'm proper old, so it was like floppy disks. I come from a generation where when you were kind of playing a computer game, you coded it off a magazine into the computer and then played it. So my first sort of like design would have been changing the colour of like a character in a game. So what we call a gaming sprite, we would kind of change green to red, or I've customised the game, it's like I'm a game designer now. I've changed that line of code. I recognise that hex code there.
It's funny because there's definite levels to this. You can see why you're successful what you do. Like when I asked you that question, I was like, what's my first experience of a computer game? Like, And I'm thinking like playing ISS and the PlayStation 1.
I had a PlayStation as well. I had an Amiga and I had thousands and thousands of games, of software, word processing. So I tried to explain that to my wife quite recently. I think why I can touch type and why I'm so proficient at computers is I grew up in the MS-DOS kind of era when that was all coming in. Windows is only like a brand new thing at that point. I got Photoshop maybe 3. Was the first version of Photoshop I used. Even the loader screen was black and white. It was proper old school. It's like the stuff you see in the Apple Macs, like when they first came out, like Steve Jobs first announced them, and it's like, oh, we've got this word processing thing and graphics, and that's the kind of world I was in. So my first computer was an Amiga. Around about 7 years old, I had my first multimedia PC. So I had a Ayami sort of CRM, call it CRT, you know, the big fat monitors.
Yeah.
They've got the big cathode tube at the back like your telly. So it was those. But that PC was a really expensive bit of kit. And I got that because my uncle was a web designer. So he was quite a well-known web designer in Dundee. And he's the only person in my family that has a business. And I just thought, oh, he's got quite a good life, hasn't he? Drives a BMW, gets all these fancy cameras. His work seems to look after him. So the creative sector, I just coined into that. There's a future in that. That seems to be a good sector. So when I got my PC, I mean, literally I just played nothing but Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory, Hybrid Anchor, Hybrid Theory, there's maybe something like that. It's nothing to do with that. But playing Tetris and basically Photoshop every day. And I just done nothing but that.
It's quite interesting how your family dynamic is there, because I've got parallels in mine. My dad was an engineer in oil and gas.
Ah, cool.
And it's funny because you had your dad as an engineer, you had your uncle, the web designer, you had your grandfather who was a programmer.
Yeah, he was a computer engineer.
The reason I'm going to ask you this question is when I was growing up, I always chose to be an engineer. I'm a failed engineer, right? I just couldn't do it. My dad done.
You're doing all right. You're doing all right.
So what made you look at, engineering, programming, web design? What made you choose the path you took?
So originally I was thinking, so I'm not going to be a Disney animator. That seems somewhat unrealistic. You remember, I was only young, so I would only been about 5, 6. A lot of people, they don't pick their career until they're much, much older, or even in their 20s sometimes. Whereas I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something with creativity, and it's that kind of the only artist that's a rich artist is a dead artist. You kind of make all your money after, and I'm going, right, well, that doesn't look like a good business model. And a sort of loose, sort of childlike way of thinking about it. So I was thinking, where can I apply creativity to something I can make money from? Who will pay me to do that? So originally that was a graphic designer. A graphic designer seemed to be where it was. But even at that time, so by the time I was like 7, I could already see that there was a setting sun in graphic design. And I know obviously there'll be graphic designers listening to this going, setting sun, I still do it. But the point was digital came in a big way. So I thought, I don't want to miss this. I want to kind of maybe try and learn how to program. I want to learn how to do HTML and CSS, because that's where I could see the future. So if I was a 7-year-old now, I'd be looking at AI and like VR and how the sector's going to change, because all of us are, in our 30s probably, and we are the old ones in comparison to that kind of sector. So I just always knew I wanted to do creativity, and it looked like there was good money in it, because as I say, the nice car, the fancy cameras, I just thought, right, he's got it made. That looks like a good life, and it's very creative and flexible, and he was working from home a lot of the days. This is like pre-COVID. Remember, this is way back in like the early 90s kind of thing, and I'm going, this looks like a great life.
So once you got through college, then it sounds like you did quite well in the end when you went back. What, as I call it, what was like proper job number one?
Yeah, so it's interesting, like first year of college, my mum and dad covered everything kind of thing, all my expenses, books and whatnot. Second year, it was a bit like, if you're going to keep in this education thing, you should really get like a part-time job. So I got a job in a call centre, worked in BCogent along with what felt like half a Coatbridge. So I think everyone in that area worked there at some point. So by the time I'd kind of finished college, I had been filled with all these concepts of grandeur, like, you're going to walk this, the people in agencies are going to love you, like you're tailor-made for an agency, that kind of way. So very encouraging. I went out, applied for what felt like 2,000 odd agencies, and I got no replies, no interviews, nothing. And a kind of reality kicked in, and I was thinking, wow, okay, this isn't going to be anywhere near as easy. And I kind of know what happened there now, but at the time I didn't. So I just thought, right, what else do I know? I don't know anything else really. So a call centre, okay. So I applied for a job. it was either go full time at BCogent, and I thought that's just too depressing. I can't do that. Like, you know, that way you've been doing a job for so long, you're thinking to click up to double hours on this thing that you already don't like. So I joined British Gas, got the thumb with the flames, and I know we share history there. We've worked in the same. So I worked in the call centre out in Uddingston at Bothwell House, and then
what did you do in there out of interest? Because we definitely must have worked there at the same time.
Yeah, so I was in customer service. So we basically were the customer care team. So we looked after people paying their bills, encouraging people to set up direct debits, selling gas and electricity, kitchen appliance care. Still know all the codes, still know all the shortcuts.
That was my old stomping ground as well, cack selling.
Cack sales, But it's funny actually, so it's like I've always been good at selling, so like in that kind of environment, I remember actually like somebody from the work had actually been in my house, and they're like, "Oh, his house is really weird," and I'm going, "Well, what are they going to say here? I hope they don't say anything too sinister, you know." And they're thinking like, "Oh, his house is like wall to wall books. They're just loads of books on selling and psychology and how people think." But to me, I always wanted to be good at my job, so I thought if I'm going to do it, I don't want to half-arse it. Basically, I want to do good at it. So you'll remember the sales sheet, and it was like the sort of the tick box sort of thing. How many CAC did you sell? How many gas, electric and so on? How many direct debits? So I remember setting myself the challenge with the call centre manager. Like I'd said to my manager and the team at the time, I'm like, has anybody ever done a full sheet? And they're like, nah, nobody's done a full sheet. That's what are you talking about? That's not a thing, you know. And I'm like, give me 2 sheets. I'm going to do a full sheet. And they're like, no, you can't do that. And I says, so you're telling me if I walk up to the call centre manager right now and tell them that I want to do a full sheet, they're going to tell me no? And they're like, no. So eventually I just give them 2 sheets, and they're just thinking, look, the guy's obviously like kind of unhinged or whatever, just give him 2 sheets. And I done it, I filled 2 sheets. Well, I filled a sheet and was on my second sheet. And to me, that was like a little victory, like a little internal victory. But it basically got me through it, because, I mean, all I did then was take calls, you know, you're getting absolutely brutalised about call time and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's a hard job actually. So you know that Animal Farm quote where it's like, you'll notice there's no old arms or animals on the farm. There was no veterans at British Gas, because if you were late 3 times, you were fired. If you didn't meet target, you were fired. And if you didn't follow script and were disciplined, you were fired. So for someone like me that was there for 2 years, that's unusual. But it kind of speaks to my kind of personality and how I just grind into it. Like that's my thing, but I want to be the best at it. But I hated that job. I really didn't like it, although I probably have a lot to be thankful for now, because it's probably made me a better, more resilient business owner, just because I went through the brutality of that. I think people that flip burgers or worked in call centres, they're kind of special people if they've went through the sort of the years of doing it. Whereas I've met people and hired people that are graduates right out of uni, and they've never worked a day in their life, and they're thinking, oh, well, we're not going to do that. And you're thinking, you've no idea how cushy you've got it, pal. Honestly, like what we worry about is not a real worry.
Yeah. So do you think you kind of alluded to this, but obviously it sounds like you've got a lot of skill sets for that 2-year stint in sales. Do you think you'd be in the position you are now if you didn't have that 2-year experience of grinding it out on the phones? I
don't think so. I think it's, you know, if you think about a call centre, so just abstract it for a second, you're doing a lot of customer service, so you're speaking, communication is key. You're being really clear and articulate. I know obviously people listening out with Scotland, they're probably struggling right now with their accents, but it is that, like, you get used to articulating and also convincing to a certain outcome. Like, you know, I'd really like you to set up a direct debit because here's the benefit. Or if you have to sell a product that you're not really passionate about. I mean, selling what I do is easy because I actually believe in the product and I know it's good because I made the product good. But when you're selling somebody else's product, you're selling what they invented. So that might not actually be the best kitchen appliance care or the best gas price for that customer. I mean, we were telling the customers the unit price. Even today, people don't know what the unit price means or how it relates to a bill. Why don't you just say to them, right, what did you pay before? So your unit price is this. This is how much cheaper it'll be. There's no transparency in the industry. It's almost like make it confusing to
I also think like one of the key synergies between kind of contact centre and being successful in business are it's like it almost hones in that skill of you being able to do the same boring thing over and over and over again, right? So when I think about us running the agency, right, I think there's a preconceived idea that running an agency is like a sexy thing. Right? It's like you're high flying, you're out and about, you're like seeing all these cool clients. The harsh reality is it's probably 90% of your week sat in front of a computer doing boring tasks over and over and over and over again. And I think working in the contact centre really prepares you for that, because it's the same shit constantly, whether you want it or no. As soon as you hit that button, there's another call that dings into your ear and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So it just prepares you almost for the inevitability of you want to make it. Get used to sitting in front of a computer for 7-8 hours a day and doing the same boring shit over and over and over again.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what I mean by some people can do that and some people can't. So that kind of monotony of, you know, you get successful what you focus on. So if you do the same thing repetitively, you will kind of last just through duration. You know, if I'm sitting willing to do a task for 3 years and you're willing to do it for like a couple of weeks and it's like, right, I'm bored now.
Aye.
The guy that can do that continuously and just keep showing up to work every day, keep showing up, get it done, and find other ways of entertaining themselves while they're doing it, they're going to be the successful one, because they're building towards a purpose rather than sort of, right, we'll see how this goes, or it's just a job to me, mate. And I'm like, but it wasn't a job to me. I wanted to be good at it, because I thought, what's the point in doing it otherwise?
I get that. And we were almost talking about pretty much the same thing yesterday on LinkedIn when looking at content and at driving inbound inquiries into your business. And you know, you look at it and go, God, they're getting a lot of inquiries. There must be some sort of secret sauce or in the strategy that they're deploying. The reality is, what gets posted on my LinkedIn every day is literally just something that's in my head that day. I don't sit down and go, right, I'm going to meticulously plan out my content for the week and I'm going to schedule it all in. It's like, right, I've got 10 minutes. What's in my head? Let's empty it out of my head and into something that like doesn't get me into hot water, and just send it out to the world. And just consistently doing that, whether you're getting those inbound inquiries or not, and having almost that just blind trust that if you just stay disciplined and keep at it, they'll keep on coming in. It's not really about correlating, that post was really clever and that's what drove them in. It's you might get the odd clever post where you've not really set out to be clever, but it ends up being quite clever and it drives you a whole bunch in. But for the most part, it's just stay disciplined to it, even when you kind of be fucked.
Yeah, to get it. So I kind of split my focus with that. So I have like planned strategic posts that are like every day and I know what I'm posting. And then I have what I class as organic off the cuff. So it's not one over the other to me. It's kind of like right, here's my branded post. This is hybrid anchor or off canvas. This is what I'm posting about. But then I'll also show behind the scenes. I'll take the selfie things and, you know, I done one the other day about a meal deal, and just I'll do mad stuff just to see what kind of sticks and where I get sort of like I'm a massive fan of the stats, so I like to kind of like really look at the stats and what resonates. I'll even post two things the same but different ways just to see interesting. That's
what was your post
higher.
about a meal deal?
I think I read this actually.
Yeah, so it's so Tesco actually lose money on selling the meal deal.
Right, okay.
So like Boots first introduced that to UK, and obviously we love it as a culture, you know, sandwich, a packet of crisps and a drink. But there's like really
so
interesting.
Shit as well.
I know,
so
it's like
shit,
such a, but it's the most common lunch that's sold in the UK, right? But what Tesco have obviously worked out there is if I can get into some of these buying routines, so if you buy your sandwiches or whatever from me every day, then you associate the brand loyalty to Tesco. Now, it doesn't matter whether you buy your stuff, if it's Sainsbury's, Morrison's, but you'll probably notice in your own life you shop at the same supermarkets. You don't tend to go out with that unless you're maybe on holiday and that's the most convenient one at the time. That's the one exception. So by them buying your loyalty for a loss leading product like a meal deal, they actually see a 34% uplift in sales. And I find that wild how that's kind of done, but it does make logical sense because it's back to your consistency thing. I am associating that Tesco's where I go to buy food. That's where I buy my lunch. I don't buy my lunch there, but that's where a lot of people go to buy their lunch. So then I'll go, I'll get my messages while I'm here, or the kids need a new controller for the PlayStation, or I need to get a new mop, whatever it happens to be. Your first default thought is, I'll go and get that in Tesco or Asda or wherever it happens to be. But I just thought it's a really interesting statistic. And then what I was trying to like kind of focus it back to the business, I do a lot of reframing. So here's a lesson, and then how does that work for software or coaching? Okay, how could you build routine? So if we think about things like Strava, everybody wants to log in and see if their pals have done another run or they've sneaked in another wee workout. Oh, I need to do that. LinkedIn have that 100% completion. You know, who's been looking at your profile? That's what that is. It's psychologically driven you to go into your analytics panel and say, wonder who's having a nose at me, you know, who's checking me out. You know, and it's like addictive, but they've engineered it into the product. And I love that because there's things you can just easily steal, swipe, deploy, put in your clients' businesses or in your business that work.
Work, aye. All right, well, we're in the rabbit hole. Right? I'll try and pull us back out and we'll stay on course, but we'll get back into that rabbit hole. So 2 years at British Gas, wasn't it for you? What was next for John?
So I met my wife around about halfway through that, so about a year into that. Passed my driving test, met her on the day I passed my driving test. So I've had this thing in my life about energy. So my energy was like on an all-time high, so she didn't stand a chance. First day, just passed my test, you know, I'm an absolute ticket, you know, like, just, this can't fail. You know, she literally tell me, don't like you, you're fat, you're ugly, you know, bolt, it's all gone. But anyway, I got with her. And we were sitting chatting and stuff, and you know, she's back in my house and she's looking around the walls and she's thinking loads and loads of books here in design and oh, you do digital art? That's really unusual. I've never met anybody that does digital art before. And oh, you've got your own kind of like freelance business and you do design and design logos. And I had all these like design sketches and just tons and tons of stuff. And she's like, what does he do for work? And I work in a call centre, so I'm like a phone banger basically. Like I sell people on the phone. And she's kind of going, all right. So as the relationship progressed, she was kind of like, I don't get this. Like, you're super passionate about design. And I'm like, I know when I was at college and stuff, and I'm like, oh, you'll find it dead easy. But I applied, I tried, I'd done the kind of thing. But really, if I look at it, I'd gave up. Right? I'd gave up on getting a job in the sector. And I just thought, it's obviously a lot harder than what they're making it out to be. So I was looking at it, and obviously by then I'm 2 years older than I was when I first tried. And it dawned on me that maybe my age was an off-putting factor, because probably what my CV didn't say is I'd been using Photoshop since I was the age of 8.
Yeah.
Probably what my CV didn't say is I'd had a computer all my life, and that I was obsessed to the point of, like, you know, I had no social life. I just did that. So I think I would have been the ideal employee for an agency, because like, here's this guy that'll just do whatever you want. He's like a grafter. He'll just get into it. So I got back in the horse and I thought, right, let's look at this CV and let's see what I could change. So I took my date of birth off it, just took it off. Took my school off it, because I thought that will reveal when I went to high school. So I took that off it. Then I thought, what if I just kind of done something wild and I designed the CV and I just made like a 3D timeline, you know, like a sort of infographic of my CV.
Yeah.
And I'll put in it like my mum was a craft teacher, my dad was an engineer, I won this merit, and you know, this was the first time I got a design and designed a logo for like, the Great Scottish Walk. So I just put all my highlights in this thing, and it was like a 3D sort of like timeline, like something like a subway station was where I based it. And I got 6 interviews, and I was like, wow. So what that told me was there's something there. Now I'm getting feedback. So back to conversion, I'm getting feedback. I'm getting to the next stage. So now I'll do the interviews. So I was offered 2 jobs, Barhead Travel or the Daily Record. Because my upbringing, like, we didn't travel a lot, so I didn't know who Barhead Travel were. They were probably the bigger company. So I chose the Daily Record. So I went over to join Trinity Mirror. Jumped over there, worked out at Hamilton, built the entire newspaper network. So we built the Daily Record website, lots of newspaper websites, and I started to learn about advertising models. Like you'll remember those, you might know blaster ads, like the video adverts that roll over the top of your screen. So I used to do that. Used to build those for like Nissan and all these kind of like cool companies, and I thought, this is quite cool. But I remember standing in the call centre getting that job offer, and the guy Craig Brown actually, who gave me the job, and he's like, look, we'd like you to come in as the designer. And I like came off the phone and I just thought, wow, this is it. I'm in the ladder now. You know, this is the first job in the career. And if I just apply my graft to this sector, I'll become a senior designer. That's inevitable. I got 6 months into that job. I got married, spent all my money, took on overdraft, credit cards, put everything all on red. Went on my honeymoon, came back, and I picked up that letter, and the letter's like, we regret to inform you, but your position has been made redundant. And I just had this ice feeling in my stomach going, oh my God, because you guys will know this being in the sector, but the sort of definition of safety is around about 3 years experience. 6 months, I'm thinking, we're headed back to a call centre here. You know, this is really, really dangerous. And there probably is like a mental health thing there. Like I really worry there's like trauma about that for me. Like going back to a call centre would be like the worst thing ever for me. Like, you know, like being sent back into a bad situation. So I just applied my graft into applying, and I thought I'm going to be the most creative person I can. Back to the old tricks at work, 3D CV, attaching my portfolio to the PDF so they were forced to look at it. You know, just trying different things. And I same thing again, lots of interviews, lots of uptake. But this was like during 2006, this was like the recession. So basically I started my career at probably the worst time we could start it. But, you know, I'm on record as saying, like, you know, I loved the recession because it was actually good because it compressed the market and made it more competitive. So then you had to just up your game if you wanted to survive. So I jumped across through there into a company called BIP Solutions that were a software house.
Right.
So we built software for procurement. So I built like a tender match, supplier development, which it's called, public contracts Scotland, the tendering systems for Montenegro government, Chinese government, UK Ministry of Defence. So I got like this, it was more of a programming role. So it was like really polished, heavily coding. You were working inside software to program all the time, working in amongst maybe 40 other engineers. So it wasn't a super creative kind of design role, it was more technical. But I think that was a good next step for me because it really polished out my sort of coding ability. So before I kind of got through that, I was thinking, right, now I've wanted to get this kind of senior position. I remember in my interview, the guy, Neil Scott, sitting across from me, he was a senior designer. And he's like, where do you see yourself in 3 years? I was like, where are you sitting? Looks good. You know? I want to be a senior designer. That's like my whole life purpose. It's the one thing that I've wanted my entire life. It's why I went into the sector to begin with. So we're building up to that, and I'm kind of encouraging them, going, oh, there's a wee job there. Have you ever thought of that? Oh, you probably get more money if you know. It's funny, you know, like in the military, like I don't know if you know Richard Sharp, like Sharp kind of thing, but it's like basically promotion comes through the major or the sergeant getting shot and killed kind of thing, and it's like, and then you get promoted. So I'm kind of like, I need him off that seat because the easiest way to become a senior is to get the guy that's the senior to leave, and then you're the kind of the next best option, so they're going to promote you. So anyway, I managed to convince him to join SPT, and he's great. He is actually a great designer, great developer. So that job came up and I'm like, right, I'm all over this, I'm going to be this. So as is the case with lots of my career, I actually shot past my goal. So you focus on it so intensely. So instead of becoming a senior designer, they merged two departments together. Like, so I had a team of 10 and I was the head of design, and I was 21 years old. So I think I was probably one of the youngest seniors in Scotland at the time. Massive responsibility, and I'm thinking, I'm loving this. You know, this is my whole life purpose. Got into that, and then my next kind of jump was, you know, that way you're kind of developing yourself and what's next. But suddenly I didn't have a goal anymore, and I think that's always dangerous when you don't have goals, because what are you building towards? So I've had all this intensity, all this momentum, and then you've achieved it, and then you get that sort of lull period where you're going, I don't know what I'm supposed to do in my life now. So the next kind of position was, right, what am I going to do? Maybe I'll become like a designer that does these TED Talks, you know, like public speaking and, you know, that kind of way. So I thought I'll put myself down for Tech Meetup in Glasgow, and I'll go and give a presentation. Oh, I was bricking it. It was like there was nearly 200 people, all engineers.
So and what age are you at this point? Are you still
I would have been 21, 22, something like that. And I'm sitting here thinking, you idiot, you know, like you've picked to do a public talk to a very technical audience that are arguably even more skillful than you are at what you're going to talk about. What a fool, you know. And I kind of gave my presentation on infographics, and a industry veteran, Alistair Gunn, at the end had came up, and I didn't know really much who Alistair was other than he worked for Interactive Scotland at the time. He was kind of heading that up, and he came over and he says, would you like to speak at a conference? And I'm just like, absolute guy for the big blagging it, going, of course I would, that sounds great. And I'm thinking, how big can a conference be? I mean, that was 200 people and I done all right. Maybe it'll just be, you know, maybe like a couple 100,000 people kind of thing. And I'm like, what's the conference called? And he's going, it's the Turin Festival. And I'm like, oh, the Turin Festival. Oh, well, that's all right then. And I'd done a couple of Google searches, and I'm like, oh, right, that seems like quite a big deal. And I'm like, what stage am I speaking on? So I don't know if you went to festivals, but you know, you get the B stage and the C stage, and it's the less known artists. So I'm thinking I'll be down here with the sort of, you know, the people that are just working it out. And they're like, so you're on the main stage. I'm on the main stage. That sounds pretty central to the conference. And I'm like, so who's up first then, you know, like just making conversation. And he's like, aye, so there's this guy here, he invented the BBC iPlayer. And I went, oh, of course, the first speaker's the guy that invented the BBC iPlayer. And I went, and who's the second speaker? And I went, it's the futurologist at Microsoft. So he's here basically building the future where Microsoft's going as an entire company. The guy's delivered tens of thousands of public talks. He's on TEDx, and I'm thinking, oh dear Lord, I've made a massive monumental fuck up here. This is bad, you know. So anyway, it came to me, and I'm thinking, why am I even here? I shouldn't be here. I'm an employee. I'm not even a business owner. These people are like all high flyers.
Just imposter syndrome.
I was
it's a wee
absolutely
voice in
crippled
your
by it.
head
Yeah,
that tells
exactly.
you you're not good enough. Why should I be here? Like,
And I mean, I was obsessed by my job, but I was just totally like, I don't deserve to be on that stage. And I think he was trying to give somebody like, here's a guy that's passionate, give him a chance. And it was a great opportunity. But that was kind of like a shift in my life at that point. So I thought, well, there's maybe something else I could be doing. So I looked around the market and I seen there was a design job going at a company called Indes. So they specialise in e-commerce. And I really noticed the quality of their work. Like everything was super polished. Like the design was on point. So I've came off the back of this Turing kind of like conference talk.
And how was the actual talk?
I think I actually done a terrible job at it, to be honest with you. I'll just be honest with it. So I've got dyslexia and I had typos in my slides and I was quite nervous. I done okay with it and I tried to kind of blag my way through it. Looking back at it now, and the video is still online, I see a lot of flaws in how it was kind of presented and how I kind of carried myself. But I was young. I was young, and
You're always the most
a big step
critical of
up.
yourself as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could tell you what I was up to when I was 21, you'd feel a whole lot better about it, believe me. I certainly wasn't on fucking stages giving keynote speeches.
That's very, very likewise here. One question I have for you, John, right, is obviously you talk about how you've always had that creative minds, and your role before you're sort of moving on to this e-commerce one, before you became a senior, was about just being a programmer.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'd imagine that's
technical.
quite technical, quite intense. How did that look day to day when you were working as a programmer? Because I don't know if people have misconceptions, or if maybe I have misconceptions, and it's like, you know, dark room, sitting there just code all day. But maybe for me and the audience, tell us how life as a programmer was.
Yeah, so I'll paint the picture. So you're working in a very well lit room, more like a hospital or a brightly lit office. You work inside a structure like a pod. So we basically went to work. It's, you know, you go in suited and booted, you wear shirt and tie. You're in a corporate environment. You log into your computer. Everything is massively restricted. So you work through red tape. You can't log into your own machine without having the LDAP and all these like extra layers of security, because you're working with administrative defence and various big clients. When you're programming, so you guys and maybe people listening will maybe know things like Dreamweaver, and you can sort of visually code things. That was my background as well, but it's raw programming, so you're going to have to type like CSS, HTML from memory, from scratch. There was no such thing as grid systems, there was no frameworks, jQuery didn't exist. Everything was just like, right, from your head, raw JavaScript, raw HTML, programming it, and then you to basically what was called a commit, like push your changes into the centre, and then look at it on a staging link, look at it on a website and see did it work. So you get very good very fast, because you have to learn how to code blind, so you're holding it in your head, kind of like a chess game, like remembering the moves.
Yeah, so in my head, I mean, I'm familiar with what you're talking about, maybe not everyone in the audience, but you are literally typing every single
line in code, so it's like open bracket, curly brace, like, or just to make it like simple, it's like, if this person's hungry, present menu, basket of apples or a drink, you know, it's that kind of thing where it's all logical driven, but you're basically building the logic, so you're telling the machine how to think, how to react. If somebody presses a button, what does it do? Does it send an email? Does it, you know, move them down a funnel? Like, does it generate a map? What happens? So it's all interaction design, and it's very not creative. It's super techy. So actually, I think it really fleshed out my technical skill set. Because when, obviously, if you compare software engineers to web designers, it's like two different things. I always use the analogy of like a joiner. So imagine like a master carpenter, that's like doing sort of like workbench work, building cabinets and stuff, and then on the other side you've got a guy hanging a door and doing basic joinery. It's not that joiners are worse than carpenters, it's just a different job. So the carpenter's in a workshop working with like actual hardwood and very specialist tools. The joiner's like kind of, right, I'll get your skirting put on and hang your door for you.
No, I think I think it's fascinating for me because I see that as just being such a high skill set, because like you think about it, you have to be very logical, everything's very regimented, but then you're a senior designer, head of design, which you could argue kind of counteracts that. You need to be a little bit outside the box, and fair play to you for doing that. I've always just been amazed by programmers, to be honest. I just tip my hat to them.
I just don't, like, my silence speaks a million words. Like, this just blows my mind.
Yeah.
Like, it's so not my world. I just tip my hat really to people that, and I don't know, like, I find it in life, I talk about this a lot, right, but you're probably one of the rare guys, John, that has and Barry's another, to be fair, that has that ability to get real technical, but can actually still sit and have a solid conversation with you, like, without hesitation. I've typically found in my career that when you've got that real techie brain, the trade-off is that your communication isn't the best, and that actually there's normally a conduit whose full job it is just to take what the techie guy says, normalise it, and then communicate that to people who don't think in that way. I played that role for a long time in my corporate career before joining Barry at Jolly Media Marketing. But I'm certainly not one of the technical minds. I just couldn't. I'm like Dory the fish, even trying to get a wee job done. Like, I sit at my desk and, what's that? Oh, did the light go off there? And like, I don't know.
I think back to your family dynamic. I kind of like, you're like your dad when you're doing the programming, then you're like the uncle when you're the designer.
Correct,
I kind of see it all coming
It's
through.
funny, actually. So it's because I moved around a lot of different schools. That's what I think that comes back to is, so I'm hyper socialised in the sense of, you can put me in a room full of strangers, right? So I was at my friend's wedding, and I didn't know anyone else other than the bride and groom. You've probably been in that scenario at least once in your life. So by the time me and my wife, who's also hyper social, the time we came away, we were best friends with the people next to us, and we were setting up a wee play date with their kids and our kids, and like, I was like, oh yeah, and they're like, oh, do you know Robert? And I'm like, oh no, I just met him here. And like, aye, but Robert likes fishing, and it was almost like I knew his life story, and I'll talk to anybody. So because I've been like that, I was like that before I was technical, because I learnt the technical skill set after the fact, and I'm self-taught actually in programming. So I taught myself at my mother-in-law's back garden with like the books, and just like a stack of books, and learning it. But the point is, I always kind of realise that is people can't follow those kind of conversations. So if you become super technical with how you explain something, and I know obviously I was giving you specifics there, but in a normal sense, I wouldn't go into that. I would use analogies, or it's like, oh right, imagine you've got like a basket and you're doing this and you're doing that, because that's something they can wrap their head around.
Right.
As soon as you start to get into object orientated code and sort of systemized, like you're like kind of white noise,
like white noise. Switch off and just go, I don't know what he's talking about.
It's just like everybody's specialised in their own area, right? But it's like, it actually doesn't help you. And if programmers got that, they would do more like in a business setting, because you can put a client off by, it's like, I just can't even relate to that person. It's actually more important to be relatable than it is to be super technical. Even though that's the skill set at the end of the day.
I couldn't agree more than that. I think people that focus on being technical rather than just being understandable, I'm just like, gone. I'm going. I can't compute it.
Just in the interest, I guess, of keeping this moving, right? So sounds in the end like you had a fairly prolonged career in that world.
Yeah.
Can you remember that wee moment, that first moment that you had where you started to consider risking it all and thought, I could maybe do this for myself here and create a better life for myself or earn more money? It's typically always a wee moment that people have in their head where they go, oh, actually, can you remember what that moment was like for you?
Yeah, so I think my kind of background was, like, the first time I had a business was around about 14, 15 years old, right? And I had that when I went through high school, and I was doing web design. So I actually built what I now know as multi-level marketing, but I built a commission-only sales team. My friend was a programmer and I was a designer, so I couldn't code for toffee at that point. how later that changed. But so I basically leveraged the skill sets around me. That was my first business. So if you think about it, I was probably one of the only 15-year-olds that were doing between, say, £2,000, £4,000 a week as a business, right? So I could have had a successful business just continuing on that path. But for whatever reason, I felt driven to prove myself in the sector. I wanted to become a senior designer and have like this isn't just done by my own back, it's done by a career. It's proven because I've actually held the job in the sector. So I thought I would never be an entrepreneur, and I never wanted to go back because that's what I seen as I want to be a designer or a programmer. I don't want to be a business owner. But then it kind of came up that I was kind of running a freelance business while I worked at Indes. So Indes wise, let's say you made like whatever, 2.5k, 3k, something like that. And then out with that, I was making about £6,000 being a freelancer. So I kind of went along to a networking event, and an employee, which is the irony of it, but he kind of said to me, he's like, oh, it sounds like you're actually doing quite well with this business malarkey. You know, it's quite impressive actually. It's quite a good number. If you're making more doing that, why would you not just run a business for yourself? And I'm going, I love my job. I work with high-end clients. I'm enjoying what I do. I don't really see the benefit of leaving. You know, it's that golden handcuffs thing. Like, you've got yourself in a senior position. So I was thinking that, and he was like, yeah, okay. So eventually I was like, you know, I'll maybe build a runway, you know, and you'll hear this in business. I'll build a 6 months runway, and that way I can give it a punt. And he said something really profound to me. He's like, that sounds great. He says, because you're right, you know, like when you launch a business, you're just going to live in your savings, aren't you? And he's like, every successful business has to generate its own number. So actually, you can't live in savings as a business owner, and you guys all know that, and I know that now. But I was kind of like deluded into this way of doing that. And I'm like, oh, but my wife's pregnant, and oh, my job's good and that. And he's like, yeah, business owners' wives don't get pregnant. You know, they've got loads of money. They don't worry about this kind of thing. Do you know what? Actually, you're better just being an employee, just a way back to work. And I just thought, I was walking back to work going, that was really rude. But then at the same time, he's right. He is right in what he said.
I've never heard that phrase before. Build a runway.
I build a runway. So I was just thinking, like, build it's like a buffer. Building that buffer of that cash reserve, if you will, just to kind of get through those initial months. So I actually resigned that day. That's how poignant that comment was to me. I went in and I just thought, right, here's what it's happening here. I'm going to resign. I had a 3 months notice period because I was a head of design when I worked at Indes. And I just served my notice, and in the background sort of ramped up my networking activity. So with that, I was kind of building up. And I thought, right, cool. What do business owners worry about? So that first one was starting. That was the first big one. And what else do business owners worry about? Because there must be other things like hiring people and taking on premises. And I thought, right, if I take a premise and I hire 3 people right off like the kind of starting block, that's going to get all this kind of negativity out of my system. So it's all like, don't build a business this way if you're listening to this. Absolute madness, right? So if I was a business owner mentor myself, I'd give myself a slap for that comment. But anyway, I just thought, right, look, build a parachute on the way down, jump out the plane, you know, as the Vikings would have done. You burn the boats, there's no retreat. That's where we're going. That's what we've done. So I started in Glasgow city centre, just off George Square. I started a company called Loudon Design. We were based in George Square. Why? Because Google put the pin down on the G1 postcode, which comes down in George Square. So the SEO kind of like edge of that, I'm thinking we'll get more business if we're based there. I hired 3 people because I thought I need to basically build a team, and that's just going to get it out of my system. And then I had the fear of not just my salary, which I had to replace and replenish, but also pay 3 people. But then obviously it dawns on you like, wait a minute, I need to buy the kit for 3 people and the software for 3 people and the SaaS and all these logins and licenses for 3 people. And I'm thinking, what have you done? What have you done? I had no savings, nothing.
What was your wife saying to
it? I think she's always believed in me, so she knows me probably more than anyone else. So she knows I'm highly driven, and she knows that I've never failed anything in my life. And that's not to say I've not had failures, but when I have a goal, I kind of get the bit in my teeth and I go for it. I don't hold back, and I'm pretty relentless at like, I work every minute of the day if that's what it takes. So I have that in me. So she's kind of like, you know, you're destined to do this. Like, I think you'll be really successful. And when I jumped out, I had all these kind of delusions of grandeur, like you know, I'm an industry veteran, man. People come to the agency and ask for me by name. Like, I'm going to do really well here. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, it's kind of not happening. What's going on? Why am I not getting the clients? And I actually said to a guy, I was like, can I just ask you, like, why did I lose this proposal? Like, just, if you don't mind, just give me some candid feedback. Just don't hold back in anything, because honestly, you'll help me so much if you're just honest with me. He says, you know, the thing is, John, we like you, but it's quite a risk, right? You know, it's risking it all, but it's like you represent quite a risk as a business because you're brand new and you might go bust in the first 6 months.
Right.
And it kind of like sunk into me again, and I was like, what if everyone thinks that? What if every person I talk to thinks that? I'm not going to be successful because they're going to go, this guy's a risk. So then I'm like, I need to basically simplify the business and then crack on to get like a kind of base built so that I can get that attrition, so I can get like the 3 years, 4 years experience where people are going, no, they've been in the market now for a couple of years. But it was scary.
Was it web design initially?
It was web design is what we did. So we were a web design company, which was hilarious because I'd never worked in an agency ever. And I actually remember clients saying to me, they're going, really quite different to other agencies we spoke to, and I'm thinking, yeah, no shit, because I've never actually worked in an agency. So
up as I go along.
I'm just like, so my only frame of reference was software, general business principles. Here's how I think it should sound. You know, like it makes logical sense to me that we take a deposit and we do this and we build a timeline, and project management's the same in that sector as it is in software. So I kind of took what I knew and I built like what I thought was a good kind of package that was, you know, a good offering to the market. But it resonated really well, and they were kind of like, it's really quite different. Like agencies don't generally tend to do that, and you start to learn what are they doing that we're not doing, and what should you be taking from that, and what should you kind of maybe go, we've actually got an advantage there. So because I was hiring software engineers rather than web designers, because remember my goal was to build a software house, not to build an agency. So we were hiring from like the top pedigree of the industry rather than from the kind of other side of it where it's like we're not going for graduates. I was kind of basically trying to build up to hire an all senior team, because I thought if we go into software, it's a much bigger competition. Like you're not competing with other WordPress kind of developers, which is what we build in now. You're actually working against like software engineers, so they're working in .NET or PHP, like big kind of pro coding frameworks. So I kind of had that kind of start, but yeah, it was a rocky kind of road at the start. That first kind of 6 months is terrifying. And you're kind of looking at a wage roster going out and you're going, that's like my entire year's salary before going out my bank every month. That's pretty terrifying.
Yeah. What I was going to say is, like, obviously the first 6 months sounded pretty scary. Fair play to you for just diving in. Was there a particular moment in time where you felt, all right, the tide is turning, this is starting to really get going?
Yeah, so about a year and a half in, I mean, how brutal was that? 18 months in, and that's when the tide is turning. But I think if you knew what businesses were, you probably wouldn't start one. I think that's kind of the consensus I hear for a lot of business people. But a year and a half in, I was offered to merge my company with another company, and I kind of flat out refused. I was like, nah, I'm good as I am, be independent, I'm enjoying what I'm building. But there was a sort of acquisition on the horizon with that. So a larger agency was leaving Edinburgh, and it presented an opportunity to acquire a division. And I thought, I'll not be able to pull this off with just my company. So there's strength in unity. So off the proviso that these two major opportunities were there, I thought, right, we'll merge the companies and it'll allow me to secure this deal. So I know with my commercial skill set and with the sort of technical backing of merging with another kind of like technical entity, we'll be able to win or have a good chance of winning this deal. So there was two. There was Ionos coming into the UK for the first time, and we were going to be one of their MSP kind of partners. So it was going to be like we'd be a supplier basically, putting Ionos into the UK. And then the second one was this acquisition of a full division. And I thought, let's just go for it, try it. So merged the company and then rebranded as Clydewire. So that was the new entity that was created. And then we acquired this division successfully, and we basically doubled up the revenue. So we went to £870,000 turnover. Previously, the highest turnover was like 360,000. So if you think about it, you've kind of like doubled up your size. And it was quite eye-opening to me, because then I'm thinking, I've always heard the growth through acquisition. You hear it getting thrown about, and generally it's the big boys that do it, like your Centricas, those kind of companies will do it quite actively. But small SME businesses don't do it. And it kind of like made me think that deal was no harder to negotiate than a logo or a website. It was the exact same thing. It's just the numbers you were dealing with were bigger numbers. But the impact was profound because I thought, wow, that's a hell of a result.
Did you take on business partners at that point when you merged, or was part of the deal when you merged that it was still your show, essentially?
So basically, I split the business 50-50. So me and a co-director, I basically diluted my shares down to 50%. We were the bigger company in that deal, but I'm always one for fairness. I think if, let's say, me and you guys done a deal, it would be 33 1/3% each, because that's just how I rolled. I don't want to have like I've got the big share, I'm the big daddy at the table here, you're on the baby share. I just don't like how that kind of does it. In my relationship with my wife, it's the same deal. We're equals, everyone's 50-50. I don't think that's actually a good idea. I don't really believe in partnerships. Like, I don't think they work too well, because you can't really have two people that are driving the boat. However, it did seem the best way of doing it at the time, because then you're thinking, look, I'm giving you every quid I make, you'll make a quid as well. So it was 50-50 was it.
How did you find that transition for going for like the guy that made all the key decisions to like, right, I need to kind of collaborate and run it past my counterpart now?
Hated it. It's a lot of so it's like, think about how your mind works, right? So my mind's a million miles an hour, and I'm probably one of the fastest I know at executing. So I'll read something in a book and I'll action it like right then and there. I'll write the document and I'll put it to work right then and there. I'll negotiate it an hour after I learn it. So that's generally how I've always been. So to go to something that's like maybe something that's not comfortable with that rate of velocity, and I could hear that even in the language, like the speed of the scale. Like, you know, we went up to 23 engineers like inside of like a couple of months. We were hiring 4 people a month, like every month. Our recruitment bill was 87 grand like for that 1 year, which is horrendous. Not for the recruiter, but for me it was. But it was just that kind of a lot of making people feel comfortable about, this is a good decision, this is the good business rationale. I much prefer it where it's like the risk is mine and mine alone. Obviously you risk things like your house and your stability, and your wife needs to be on board with that. But I do think there should be one driver in every business. Ultimately, it's very difficult to have 2 drivers in a car. Somebody says go right, somebody says go left, and you end up with a sort of car that's either torn apart or that doesn't move anywhere. And I think when you're competing against businesses that are in partnership like that, it's actually sometimes a weakness that people don't think about, because that is going to be an internal thing. I know lots of businesses that have 2, 3 owners, that kind of way. It's different with you guys, like you've got a family relationship as well, I think. But in generally, I kind of find it's like you can't have that, because it's like I might have a strong opinion and I think it's right, but if I can't convince the other party, and I'm like, why should I even need to convince the other party? If it's going to help growth, why would we not just do it? And your staff trust you to kind of make the decision on their behalf, but business owners don't tend to work like that.
And obviously I can see how you've got this opinion. I'd imagine there must be some other part of this story that we've not got into. So obviously you merged and you had an acquisition.
Yes.
Well, you were in a 50-50 partnership?
No, so the 50-50 was done because of the acquisition.
Right.
So it was kind of like, let's present ourselves that we're merged, and then see if I can bring this deal over. And if I can bring this deal over, then it's a done deal.
Right.
Because basically, if you think about it, I'm trading in a company that's like approaching $500,000 in turnover with a 30 to 40% net. We're merging in with a much smaller entity, like a sort of 80 to £100,000 turnover. So it's a much smaller element. So for them, you wouldn't trade half of your company into, and that's why I said no to it originally, because I thought that doesn't make sense to me. However, with the acquisition, I'm doubling up even the part I've got. So half of a much bigger cake is a bigger cake. And I wasn't looking at it as this is the deal. I was looking at this as deal one. That's like day one, the first deal that gets laid into the ground. So imagine how many of them you could get over a 10, 20 year span of an agency. And I thought this takes us much closer to my goal of building like a software house. So I'm like, right, that's what we're going to do here. We're going to acquire this, but let's kind of like present to them that we are merged. And then we'll just say that's kind of like forming in the background, and we'll just see if we can pull this over the line.
How did it all end up?
So we got it. We got the deal there, came over. Just amazing. So we got to go through a 2-pay process. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but so basically we got to cherry pick the staff that we wanted from that kind of block. But also I had kind of people at my back kind of advising sort of HR professionals kind of going like, just be careful of a hospital ship. And I'm going, what's a hospital ship? Never heard that term before. And in business, there's loads of things you don't know. So like what people sometimes do is when they sell a division, they'll sort of like unpack all their undesirable people. So people that have got like really bad problems, like they're never in work, they've got like very, very serious issues with how they view work and lots of the disciplinary sort of attributes about them. But if they just tuck them all inside there and say, right, they're on the IT division and that's what you just bought, it's kind of like, your car, you bought it, mate, bought as seen, and you're kind of like, wait, no, oh, well, how's that work? So if you make that person redundant, if they've worked there for 20 years, you have to pay their redundancies if you've hired them for 20 years, rather than the 2 or 3 years that your company's been going for.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's good to know. So when I was in there, I mean, I was like a absolute Rottweiler, like with the negotiations, and I'm going, I want to see the HR file on every single person that we are proposing to take on. I want to see their, like, how many times they've been late, everything about it. And I also want to interview them, and I want a 6 months break clause that if I decide to terminate that person, like if I decide that's happening, then you're on the redundancy. So you would be best now to tell me if there's any sort of attributes to this list of people that I should know about. And the guy that was their HR advisor was almost like that's not his first rodeo. You know, you can see there's like and it was my first rodeo, but again, you've got to fake it till you make it, don't you? You have to just kind of go through that process as if you're full of confidence. And there's a lot of late time reading and sort of how does it actually work and what's the difference between a shareholder and a director and how does the equity split work and how do you know, what is 2P and the risks of 2P. There's a lot of Google searches just to make sure we got it.
Yeah, fair play to you, because there is a lot to chew through. And we've not done an acquisition yet. Hopefully we will in the future. And, you know, I recognise 2P in some other terms, but there's a lot of stuff here that, you know, I wouldn't have no idea. But obviously you pulled it off.
Yeah, definitely.
And what was that like then with your first acquisition? How did that fold into your existing business? What was the next stage?
So yeah, it kind of really doubled us up. We had to hire a lot of engineers, so it put us on a sort of fast scale. So we basically became recruiters' best pals because we were spending a lot of money in the market. So we're hiring senior engineers in to kind of do this kind of work. And then because of that, I was then out looking for other acquisitions because I'm like, well, there's one, there's many. So at the time, my business partner's thinking like, this is a really good opportunity, and thinking inward, like the sense of let's render this, like the operational mindset. And I'm thinking there's probably another 9 of them out there. Like, you know, that we need to find other companies that are moving to London or looking to get rid of a division, like we'll start asking about. So my focus became that, as well as selling into this infrastructure. But we were kind of using that as a vehicle to build a stronger kind of software house. And we had some really great kind of clients that we'd been able to kind of bring in even directly by leveraging the fact that we had this scale. So that went really well as a company. There was some cultural things as well, like bringing 2 different teams together is not easy. You know, like different cultural ways, or that's not the way we worked. And you're thinking, I get that, but I'm the kind of owner now, so this is how we're it's like a lot of, but you can't say that, so you've got to say like well, let me hear your view, and you're like, well, there's good and there's bad, you know, I like this and this and this, so maybe we'll take that for theirs and we'll take this for theirs. But I liked my culture, so I didn't really want to dilute the culture, and I think that's the fear with acquisitions, is you could very easily get yourself into a bit of a messy situation where it changes your culture. So if you think about it, you've got say 10 staff and you buy something with 40 staff, there's 4 of them to every one of your guys.
Yeah.
So your culture ain't going to stay the same. It's likely to going to become like the other thing. But what if you don't like that culture? What if that culture is actually a toxic culture and people hate coming to work? And now that's your culture because you own that.
Yeah. It's quite a dynamic, isn't it? So in this scenario, did you acquire a business that was bigger than yours at the time?
Yes, that division, like, so put it this way, that division was as big as Loudon Design. And my server guy merged together. So it basically doubled us. There was maybe like 10 grand in it. But it basically doubled us up.
Do you still have that business today, or did you
No,
exit
so
that
I'm
business?
still a shareholder of that, but I've basically, during the kind of COVID years, our market was just massively impacted. We were in travel, so planes were grounded, so we worked with like, was it like 2A and British Airways and Flight Centre and all these kind of companies like that. On the other side, we were working with like commercial picture houses, so like we were hosting trailers and for like movies out in California. and they basically stopped making movies. So I couldn't believe it, because I'm almost like kind of, no recession upsets me. When they announce kind of tightening in the market, I get excited, because it's going to cause chaos, it's going to cause opportunity. And I thought COVID's going to present itself like it's like a recession. That's kind of the way my frame worked. I was going like, I've been through recessions, and actually they've always been good to me, so we're probably going to do quite well for this. And then it's like the ground planes, they stop making movies, they put restrictions on people, and I'm thinking, we are completely the wrong shape for what this market is becoming. And a lot of people in our sector thrived because they weren't in the spaces we were in. So because we were in these like big blue chip spaces that were massively impacted with COVID, they basically just put a halt to all retainers. So we basically lost around about 90% of revenue in that kind of initial couple of weeks. It's scary. Imagine having 23 engineers to feed, your own income, 2 directors' incomes, and it's kind of like the good times have ended. You're kind of like, right, now what are we? And at that point, that's where you go back to partnerships, going, what are we going to do here? Like, what is the plan? And if, one side wants to do one thing and you're thinking that's a terrible idea, I disagree, I think we should do this, that's where that came. So I started Hybrid Anchor off the back of that, and then left into it to run Clydewire and do what they're kind of doing. So I was the departing kind of party. Started Hybrid Anchor with a sort of a means to sort of like focus on e-learning and software, kind of go back to more of what Loudon Design was prior to the kind of merge, but kind of bigger and better, having known what I know now, and started building that. So that's why I'm in Hybrid Anchor now, doing exactly that.
So
off the back of it.
So your pivot was forced through COVID, and then it kind of just got you back to what you had,
what I know and love. Yeah, and I think actually I don't regret it, because it was massively educational, and the things I learned through doing that. Like, if we hadn't bought that division, and how would I have known what having a co-director was like? I think it's good to do these things just to get an experience for what you like and don't like, and then you can decide. Put it this way, right? So if you guys started tomorrow, you would do things completely differently, right? If you think about your first 5 moves, you're like, right, we do this, then we do that, then we do this, and you would almost like shorten that timeline. So if you think about it, like, we've been able to get ourselves up to scale. So there's like 28 of us now, and I've been able to do that in 4 years. So you're like, it's not dissimilar to what we've done previously. So we are now as big as Clydewire was at its peak, and I've done that on my own. And it's like we move faster, and we don't have any of the sort of like gremlins in the system, because I laid every brick. I chose every person that's in my boat and the seat they take on the bus. That was me that's kind of made that call. But if I make mistakes, then it's only me it hurts. It doesn't actually hurt anyone else. And I'm like, it's actually good in a way to do that. So it's kind of like coming full circle.
Makes sense. And was there any hesitancy? So
With
COVID, 90% revenue tanks, you've worked, you've worked round the clock, you've got into a brilliant position, and then bang, that happens. Was there any doubt in your mind about just jumping straight back in and doing it again? So
there wasn't for me. I kind of think that I'm always going to be in business in some form or other. I also had, like, because of the way that I'd all ended, I had I think it was like maybe a £66,000 debt that I had as well. And I thought, I'm not going to be able to clear this. Like, the payments on this director's loan and different things that are owed to me by the other company that's now overturned, I'm going to have to generate my way out of this. And I don't know if you've read the book, The Psychology of Money, but it basically speaks about this, like building a business as a vehicle to generate wealth. But actually building a business is your fastest way out of a debt hole as well. So instead of like actually taking a job and then paying PAYE and taxes and all the other stuff, you can be more efficient by building a company and then use its growth. So I became debt free again after 18 months at Hybrid Anchor, and it's because I had a goal. So that's what I was going to do, and I put every pound, shilling, shekel to doing that. Became debt free, and then it was like, right, now we're into growth and where we're going to go with it. So I kind of knew that that's what it was going to be, but it was through a need as well. Yeah. Realistically, I wouldn't have been able to do that in a job. I'd probably still be servicing that debt today if I'd took a PAYE job, even a good job. And I was offered managing directors jobs. I was offered operational directors, creative directors jobs, big salaries, really big salaries. And an older John would have probably took your arm off, but I was kind of thinking, but so inefficient. Like, I'm going to pay so much in tax. I'll probably net what I was making when I was paying myself like 80k, getting paid 180k. I'm going to lose like almost 100 grand in one tax or another and all these inefficiencies. Plus, I won't be my own man anymore. I'll be working for the man. And I'm like, I just couldn't cope.
And so for all of those that are listening that share the same mind as me, explain in the simplest possible terms, what does Hybrid Anchor do?
So Hybrid Anchor are not a full service agency. We are a specialist projects company. So we do software. So we build online software and applications. The best way to explain that is you get trades that use maybe whiteboards or pens and papers or spreadsheet. We turn that into systems. So in business, there's things called standard operating procedures, like a procedural flow of steps that you use to render success in your business. We build software around those for companies. We also help coaches, consultants and counsellors build online platforms. So it could be like an educational platform like DISC or the Cialdini Institute, Robert Cialdini. They build this environment, like a digital environment around a skill set. So that's what we specialise in, is building software, tools and websites around kind of like either problems, challenges or markets. So we are a pure play kind of projects company, which is actually why we bought Off Canvas, because it's something quite different to what Hybrid does. And it offered that kind of like diversity.
I was going to ask you about that. So I know that you've made another acquisition, Off Canvas. So tell us a bit about how that came to be and what that business does that complements your existing.
Yeah, to get that. So as I was building Hybrid Anchor, we're always in the outlook for acquisitions. I speak about it quite a lot when I'm having coffees and stuff. Like I know when we first had our coffee, I always kind of drop it in there because you never know who knows someday. So I get the call, as I often do. There's this guy, he wants to exit. He offered me the agency, but I wasn't in a position to buy it because people have this idea that people that buy companies are millionaires and they've just got stacks of cash sitting there, and you're like, oh, do you want some of my stack of cash? There you go. I'll have your company then. And it doesn't work like that. But basically he says this guy's looking to exit, and I went, well, I'll just go and have a coffee with the guy. So I went out and met him 2 days after I got the referral. Went and had a chat, and I says, what is it you would like? So what would success look like for you in this acquisition? He told me what he wanted. I went, yeah, sounds good. Timeline, when are you thinking? Is this something you want to do now? Or maybe 6 months. I went, why do you feel 6 months? So like, feel 6 months because we want time, or I mean, I'm happy to do this right now. And they're like, oh. So we had this kind of chat, came to an agreement on it. But obviously, as you're buying something, and it's one of the kind of hidden advantages to acquiring, you get to see other agencies' models, and you get to look at it and say, they do that better than we do that, but they do this worse than we do it. They're overpaying for staff ratio, but they're underpaying for this. They don't have these protections, but they have these better contracts.
See, I love that, right? We've spoke about this. So, see, for me, right, good old benchmarking, it's completely flawed because, so I'll give you an example, right? We started to really tightly track what's coming in terms of leads, what's happening with those leads, how many are going to appointments, all the stuff we were talking about yesterday, right? So it's like you've got your own internal benchmark because you've got all your KPIs, but you're looking at it and going, so like we hired a new sales exec and he was looking at the stats and he was going, is that good? And I was like, I actually don't know because we know what we know. And then I thought, I'm in a chat with a whole bunch of other agency owners on WhatsApp. Let me fire a wee message in saying, here's what I'm looking to do. I want to benchmark ours against yours. Who's brave enough to share with me what yous are all up to? But you get a sense that it's almost like nobody's going to let the mask slip. The information that you're given portrays that image of perfection. We're doing great.
Yeah, of course.
I always get a sense that you're ultimately getting fed what they're comfortable with feeding you. Unless you've got a right tight or close relationship and another mate happens to own a business that does exactly what you do, then maybe you can do that benchmarking. But I love the idea of being able to have a wee nosy, a wee peek at true benchmarking, as you say.
You'll definitely get it, because when you get their memorandum documents, you get access to that. So you sign an NDA, and obviously I don't go and contact customers, and I don't share the information. But you still absorb the lessons. Aye. So it's kind of like that's interesting. You can ask questions as well. So you're on the inside of that. So like say I was acquiring you guys, I could kind of go, so what's the acquisition pathway here? How do you bring clients in? And then you might say something different to me. So I get my sales for networking, you get yours for tendering. Interesting. So what tender portals are you on? And have you got examples of that? Because I would need to do that. If I bought your company, I'd need to continue what you're doing right now. So in a way, you're kind of getting like a free education of what they do.
Sneaky.
And it's not even like,
I like it
because
though.
it sounds like, I know what you mean, right? But it kind of sounds underhand, as if you're kind of like, you're kind of peeking behind the curtain. But it's kind of like that just happens the same way as like doing a podcast. You talk to other business owners, they're going to share things with you in this format.
You need to know it.
It's a good thing to do. But when I spoke to Phil, the previous owner of Off Canvas, I was like, so if I'm understanding this right, you built an agency that only does support. Am I right in saying that? So you don't do any projects? And he's like, yeah, we only do support. And I'm thinking, this guy must have the patience of a saint. Honestly, I mean, think about building an agency where all it does is support contracts. Like, so you're not allowed to do any of the big stuff, right? So you're not allowed to do apps, websites, all the big money. It's just purely supporting WordPress, Joomla sites. Like, so it's just a support contract. It's kind of like an IT company for websites. And I thought, I've never heard of that before. I've never seen a single agency. And I mean, I know thousands of agencies, and I've never seen an agency that does that. My experience with that is an agency always sells projects. So they'll say, right, we'll do your app, we'll do your website, and then you sell a retainer. And let's say it's a 5 hour a month retainer. And then this client, let's call them Deborah. Deborah phones up and says, my website's got an issue, can you help me? And they kind of look frantically as the business owner around and go, right, you're a developer, can you help Deborah to fix this issue? So you kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, and then all the while that developer's going, I've got a deadline for Friday, John. I'm going, aye, no, we'll get to that. Just deal with Deborah now and that. Right, you happy, Deborah? And it's like, right, this project. And then I bully them to try and get through this fucking deadline because I've stole the time. So what kind of this represented was interesting. So if we talk about vertical and horizontal integration, I can take this company and I can take all the support element out of Hybrid Anchor and give it to this company, which makes that company bigger and more valuable. But then all their clients aren't getting sold projects. So then I can say, hey, we've got this other company over here and we specialise in projects. That's all we do. We don't do any support, right? So in our world, we've got two scales. So we've got a massive advantage over other agencies that have to kind of like balance the two of these things together. So that's how I've communicated that back to the market. But basically, I got really excited by that, going, if I can't buy this, I'm going to build one of these because this is like brilliant. But I thought it would take ages to build it because you have to be so patient to build a company like that.
Why was the existing owner looking to leave? Was it retiring or?
Yeah, so Phil has a business already. So he had multiple businesses, but I guess it's seasons of your life, what you're kind of doing. So in his kind of setup, he didn't want to have multiple things to manage and kind of juggling different things. I'm the other way around. Like, I want to have 50, 60 businesses. I want to have like a big kind of complex setup, and I like it because I thrive on chaos and I enjoy that, and it's all about getting the managing directors and the kind of leadership team into your group. But that's not where he was at. So he's had a really successful run. If you look at his career, he's been smashing it at the park for a long time. So for him, it was just like, this is a way of simplifying my setup, and I can kind of take like a step back. I do that, and now he's able to focus on his business that he's got and grow that, which I think is great.
And so what did you actually acquire when all was said and done in terms of headcount? How quickly did you make it happen?
So made that happen straight away. So it's basically got actioned literally the same week it was agreed, which I think is the best way of doing that. We moved over 12 staff. We didn't inform the client base until 12 months in because I wanted to have like a year to sort of like build relationships with the existing client base where they seen me as the MD.
That's interesting. Actually, I've never heard of that.
Yeah.
I say I've never heard that. I've maybe just never asked the question, but talk to us a bit about your thinking with that.
Yeah,
actually.
so let's say you buy a company, right? So I find an agency, and the agency is run by somebody called Bob, right? So Bob's the agency owner, and I buy the agency off of Bob. What's my biggest risk about buying that? Like, what do you think could be the biggest thing that could go wrong?
Bob disappears, sets up shop elsewhere, and the clients go, I like Bob, we've been with him for a while, we'll go to Bob.
Correct, and you hit a nail right in the head, and that's exactly what happens. So generally when you buy a business, you leave the person in for vendor, like so you leave them in there for maybe a year or two, and the only reason you're doing that is so they can kind of go like, oh, John's actually a nice guy, right? So they go, the clients are going to go, I like Barry, Barry's my guy, oh, Barry's sound, and I'm going, but I'm nice too. right? But I'm kind of justifying. But see if I can just show, like, wait a minute, Barry's not been dealing with my issues here. John's been dealing with my issues. And John's on the ball and he's always responsive and he's brought a lot of benefit in since he's became the managing director. And then after the kind of said and done, then I announce it as I've acquired the remaining shares of the business. And then voila, I'm now the owner, but the clients look and say, yeah, but it's John I've been working for the last year. It's actually John that got us these extra sales, passed us this tender, connected me with this guy. So all that goodwill passes. So it's just a protection method. And that's why even if you're going to do a deal and you pay things up front, I don't encourage that. But if you do a deal at any point and you buy it, you give them the money up front, add in a wee bit of vendor anyway. Just add a wee bit of, 12 months, we'll do some payments. So even if I'm paying you the bulk of the money, 60, 70%, we're doing a bit on vendor because I want to protect myself from exactly that outcome.
Aye, so I think having done our initial research, we're off our vendor for obvious reasons, but I never thought of it that way. I always just thought actually it would be easier just to punt them at the door on day one. It's yours, you can start to own it. Yeah. But that you're essentially doing the same thing there, but you're still having him as a bit of a figurehead.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's like I gave him his place, but Phil didn't need to do any work in the company at all. Aye. So for that entire year and a half that I purchased the company, he didn't have to do any labour within the business, which I think is correct. That's the way it should be. So he was given his money. It was payment. My agreement was I wouldn't take any money out of the business. So people on the outside of that would maybe look at it and say, you worked for free for a year and a half. And you're going, yeah, because you're probably used to living in short-term gratification. That's not how I live. Like, I've got an income. Hybrid Anchor pays my income. I don't need a second income. It's nice, but I don't need it. So when I buy it, I then have the choice of, do I want the income for me? Do I want the income for growth? Do I want the income for me and growth? And what it is. So by the time I had bought it out, I'd already doubled the size of the agency, right? So you're talking about staff. So we took on 12, so 13 minus Phil is 12. Comes over into Hybrid Anchor. Again, nice kind of effect there, but we keep that team separate because they specialise in support. And in the last month and a half, we've hired 7 staff. So like we've really grown quite nicely. And it's because now we've got this compound effect, like 2 companies playing into each other, and it's kind of like these have never like we could do an iOS app. And they're like, they only used to do websites. Like, yeah, so we do different things that they do. So this is like what we do. Maybe I should come out and take you for a coffee, have a chat to you about like some of the services we could offer. And they could turn around and say, that's not for us. But I think that more often than not, people are kind of curious, like, what kind of things have we maybe left on the table,
It's complementary, isn't it?
Complementary services.
I was just going to ask you a question, right? So
yeah, fire away.
Obviously, this is your second acquisition after your first one, so we're just in our learning journey with acquisitions, and we're full of enthusiasm with it. But was there anything that really, really surprised you about buying a business?
Probably how easy it is. So I think that back to that kind of point, even like the first time I ever met somebody that done acquisitions, they had 53 businesses and they were kind of talking to me about that. And I was kind of going like, right, well, obviously they must have just had like a construction company or something and they've just made mad cheddar. They've made crazy profits. There's a big war chest of cash. And then they're turning around with a big war chest of cash and going, that looks nice. I'll buy one of them. And that's genuinely what I thought they did. And then when you look at it, it's actually nothing to do with that. So it's like I would happily buy something. Like one of the agencies I looked at literally 2 weeks ago was a £1.8 million buy. And I'm sitting there kind of going, cool. I know I can get my hands on £1 million. So I could pay the down payment and then I could buy it through vendor and all that kind of way. I wouldn't have been thinking that way because I would have been thinking like, this is our company. We can't even dream of leveraging that kind of capital. But it's how it cash flows. So if you buy something like, so £1 million, the finance on that's like 23 to 25k per month. So if you're buying a business that cash flows 38k or 30k or whatever a month, it basically services its own loan. Yeah. And then by the time that's paid, but you're good anyway, right? Aye. So that's one way of doing it, but the smarter way of doing it is actually just to buy it through vendor, get, let's say, anywhere between, say, 3 and 5 years of payments, and then take them at the deal in the second year. So by the second year, you've been a managing director for 2 years anyway. So then you can just go to the bank and say, I'm the director of this, I own over 25%. I would like to buy this business from the previous owners. They're retiring, whatever the story is, and this is how much money I'll need. Yeah. And the bank will say, yep, I can see you're running it. I like it. You're there. You've got sector experience. You guys are a marketing company. And they add all that into your kind of case and then say, yeah, we'll back you. They give you the loan and now you own it. But remember, you're cash flowing the extra bit for that entire time. So that's actually like extra income.
Yeah.
You know, if you're servicing a 25k loan, they're paid. And then you've got that difference between the two numbers is your income. So you could add another 10 grand onto your wages. Or you could kind of say, do you know what, we could take 5 grand and ploy it into marketing.
Yeah.
Because people don't do that. You guys might do it because you're in the sector.
Oh, we'll do it.
Right. But
I'm skint.
my experience is people, like, I've got a good friend, he's a patent attorney, right? And it's like, he says that, it's like, it all surprises me that people are willing to buy flats and they're willing to make investments, but they'll never invest in their own companies. You notice that? And I think there's actually something in that. So I've kind of spoke to a lot of people about this, going, if I gave you £250,000 right now, and you could only use it in the business, where would you put it? And a lot of people can't answer that question in business because they've never really thought about what it is. But see, when you reframe that, so reframe it the other way and say, right, you've got the opportunity to get your hands on £250,000, but you need to show how you would grow the company. So you're almost like a fake VC. How would you grow the business? The number one way of doing that is actually to acquire another agency. And it's like the £250,000 doubled up the size of the company, guy got his better return, everybody won. But I don't need to sell a big percentage of my company to a VC to know that. So I can operate as an independent kind of party. And it does do that because eventually you end up sitting on more kind of profit where you don't need to take it as salary. Like, why would you pay the tax on it when you can roll it into building a bigger empire, a bigger set of assets?
And in terms of the seller's experience when you've offered vendor finance, I've always been of the viewpoint, until recently to be fair, it's definitely softened, but I've always thought, well, as a seller, why would I want vendor finance? Why would I not want that big lumper into my bank? Like, what are you doing to try and almost like get them on board with that's a great way to...
I suppose just to jump in with yours as well, can you explain vendor finance?
Yeah, of course I can.
We're in the weeds with it, but you know, to answer Brian's question, what's the benefits to the seller and what actually is it?
Aye. So let's talk about what it is first so we know what we're talking about. So vendor finance, it sounds as if you're going to the bank to get a specific type of finance, like asset finance or something like that, right? So what vendor finance is you've got the seller on one hand that owns the business, and you as the buyer are saying, I would like to buy your business at the value that you're saying it's worth. So we've looked at it, it's worth 1.8 million. I would like to pay you over 3 years, or let's even just say it's like 2 years, so get 900,000 each year, and I just pay you monthly of that. So I take over the business in day one, I give you a loan note, and I pay you over 2 or 3 years, whatever the term is, and you say, yep, that's great, that's what we'll do. And then by the time it hits 2 years, I'm now able to prove that I've been the managing director or the main director of the shareholding for 2 years, and I can get a bank to underwrite it and take you out the deal straight away. Right, so it's probably one of the most efficient ways of buying businesses. And when people throw that back at you where, well, I'm not really comfortable with vendor, you can just remind them that 87% of all businesses that are sold in the world are sold that way. That's the most common way it's done, which puts people at ease. However, my prediction is in this market, you're going to find a lot of people coming off the back of a course and sort of like messing it up because they'll say something they shouldn't, or they kind of like set that up in a squirrely way. They can't get the underwriting of the loan, and then it's kind of like oh shit, you know, this is the first, second, third one we've done, and we didn't really predict that the bank wouldn't underwrite it because it's not been set. So you could technically take shares up to, let's say, 10%, get all the way into the second, third year, and the bank will just say no because you don't own 25%. But if you don't know those kind of little rules, then you're going on the proviso that the bank will underwrite this, but you need to make sure the bank actually will underwrite it, and what bank and how you're going to do it.
So you're saying that after an X amount of time, you can go to a bank to underwrite
24 months. So it's 24 months and 1 day. If you own 25% or more of the shareholding, then you can do what's called an MBO, a managed buyout. And that's a very common thing in the UK, and there's lots of stats on it, lots of things to give comfort. What ends up happening, to answer the second point that was asked about how does the seller feel about that, it's about giving security, right? So I'm going to demand security for you if I'm going to give you £1.8 million. Like I want to make sure that I am safe because I'm not putting my money into something if it's going to be a case that it could roll back onto me and hurt my family or hurt my businesses, hurt my staff. So the vendor finance is partly for me, but it's also the most efficient way of buying it. So if I say to you, look, you know the business can cash flow, so why don't we allow the business to cash flow? I'm not going to take any money. It's going to take over on day one, pay you for the 2 years. We've got a 5-year deal, and then I'm taking you out the deal just slightly over the 2-year mark. And then I'm going to get the better finance because I'm able to evidence. You can actually do it earlier, but 2 years is the kind of when you get the best price on the finance, so you're not paying crazy prices. But I would do it before as well. But all you're really trying to do is give that person security, right? So I can put my companies up as collateral, kind of like your house is a guarantee, similar to that. So you're saying, I've got businesses here, they're valued at this, which is more than what I'm buying, or same or similar. So if I lose everything I own. If you lose, you don't lose that. You just get your company back, and you own my companies as well. So actually, it's good for you. And here's my tenure. So you'll notice that when I bought Off Canvas, I done the whole PR thing behind it, and that was very tactical because I want anytime I speak to somebody about an acquisition that I can point the finger and say, here's what success looks like. And you could very easily go and talk to Phil and say, what was this person like to deal with? And I know for a fact that Phil's going to say, John's a very straight-laced guy. When he says to you, I'm not going to take a penny out of the business, I didn't take a single penny off that business. I didn't even buy a coffee off that business for the entire tenure that I had on it until he was fully out the door, fully squared up and happy. But it was intentional, because if I had, then I think it's like look, Hybrid Anchor's having a bit of a choppy month. I've built up this profit in it. Remember, I've doubled the company, so I have a right to that money I've built.
Yeah.
It's mine, but I still wasn't going to do it because our deal was, let's get him square, then I'll do it. So I kind of just banked the money up, and then it gave me that sort of position to go, right, we've got this war chest now where there's, let's say, 70 grand profit sat inside Off Canvas, and I'm like, right, let's deploy it into marketing, let's deploy it into this, let's invest in our kind of leadership team, let's hire more staff, let's take a bit of a bonus for the kind of year and a half of free labour that you've gave. Not crazy, but just, take some money off the table, as they would say in poker. And that's just the way I've kind of done it. So I think that's how for the seller. But you are going to get a lot of people that push back and say, like some people really don't like the idea that their company's bought from within itself because they think that's their money. And it's like, so think about VAT and corporate tax. And you're like, yeah, but you're a lunatic. That's not your money. That's HMRC's money.
Yeah.
Right? Your money is the profit. So that's the only bit. So although you might do a sky high turnover, that's not your profit. Your profit's this bit. So if I'm using the profit, you're getting free wages for 2 years and then a big balloon payment at the end. But you can sweeten the deal. So you could say, well, what about if I gave you £600,000 today, £600,000 on vendor, and £600,000 I take you out with a loan. So we'll do the loan over 4 years for vendor finance. So it's 300,000, 300,000, 300,000, 300,000. But you know that by the time it hits the 2 years, you'll just take them out with the last payment, and then you've got upfront, during, and after. And I think that's something that sometimes makes people feel more comfortable, but it does limit how many deals you can do because you've only got so much. So like right now I've got capital I can deploy, but I'm not going to chuck my capital into every single deal that's going. I've got 3 or 4 just now I'm trying to make work, but I don't want to put all my capital into like this one deal and then the other 3 fall away because I couldn't negotiate it.
And would you typically be talking to the bank before you agree to a deal? So although you might not need them to 2 years in, ideally, would you still be talking to them before you agree to the deal to say, look, 2 years ahead of time, this is what I'm thinking, or do you just wait until that moment?
No, so I kind of know my financial standing because we use a financial broker. So we use a TSF Finance with Sarah Sheeran. But they can check your kind of financial standing. Kind of like if you bought your house, you get a mortgage in principle. So it's kind of like if I had to take a loan of capital, how much capital could I lay my hands on and at what interest rate? So I know I could take $1 million right now. I'm not going to take $1 million right now, but I could take $1 million right now to buy something. But I'll still do it through vendor. But I'm happy to kind of chuck in, here's a bit of money up front to sweeten the deal and
take care of their tax. That was another thing that was, admittedly, I only learned about this recently, is that even if you're doing vendor finance over 5 years, for example, the seller's due the tax at the point at where they dispose of the asset, as I understand it.
That's right.
So the next time they do their tax return, although they've not benefited to the tune of all those payment shit, they're due the tax on the sale of it. That was something I couldn't really wrap my head around either. Like how do you sweeten them around that, because they know they're then going to have a huge tax bill. But some of what you've spoke about today, I think, helps answer.
You can throw it back to them as
that.
well, and you say, well, I mean, we can quite happily do it 18% if you wish. Makes no difference to me. But I'd rather you get 8% saving on the money. So if you're going to get £1 million, I'd rather you get 80 grand in your pocket rather than HMRC's pocket. And most people will be quite reasonable with that. Remember, you can kind of like cut the deal any way you want. So you can kind of say, look, we can give you a non-exec position in the company, which will pay you for the next, say, 12 months, which will cover that number. There's things that you can do within the company's there. Same way with your own company, you could add a director on tomorrow.
Yep.
You can give them a bonus. You can give them the cash out the bank after 3 months. There's different things you can do to kind of give them advantages to do that. You know, you can kind of say, I'll put this in your pension rather than pay you. I think after that kind of kicks in with the capital gains going up, I think a lot of people will hold it inside a holding company. They'll just not basically extract the wealth. So they'll basically bill it into the company and then roll it again. So they'll sort of just keep building, and then they'll have a liquidity day when it's a much bigger number. Because then it's like, well, yeah, you're paying extra tax, but
who cares?
if your EBITDA is over 2 million, you're getting a many, many times greater multiplier anyway. So why not just roll it until it's bigger?
All right, mate. Well, listen, we've certainly started touching on some of it anyway, but we normally like to kind of wrap things up with just asking about future plans. So it sounds like mergers and acquisitions are a huge part of your thinking, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So tell us what the plans are for your group over the next maybe 3 to 5 years.
You're not far away from it. So my goal was to hire 40 people within the next 3 years. We've hired 7 already, so we're well on way to that target. But recently I've kind of been looking at it as if it's not ambitious enough as a goal. So my goal is to buy between 5 and 10 agencies and basically build a group. So Sargasso, my holding company, we're building agencies that complement that structure or will merge flat into the existing infrastructure. So if we built someone that done projects and support, we would merge it into the 2 separate agencies and sort of like split it among that. Whereas if we buy a marketing agency, it will actually sit as an arm of the company because it's a distinct service. So that's our kind of ambition with it. So, you know, jump 3 years forward, I'm looking for around about 5 to 10 agencies that have been added to that. Off Canvas would be the first, and we'll just continue on that path. That's kind of like an 80-20 rule. So 80% of my time will be focused on this, and 20% will be basically back running Hybrid Anchor. We've got some news that we'll be sharing in the January, which is like a wee bit of a teaser, but yeah, it's a big change that's happening at Hybrid Anchor.
Right,
okay. We'll hear more about that.
Lovely. Well, I will keep an eye on your socials, mate, and look forward to that announcement. But I guess that feels like a nice place to wrap things up. Many congratulations on, you know, you've certainly risked it all, probably on a number of occasions thus far, mate, but I dare say it's paying off for you now. So well done. Thanks a lot for coming on, as always. And thanks to our listeners for hanging on to the very end. We'll be back in a few weeks, as always, with another episode.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you.
Cheers, John.
Guys. Appreciate
Cheers.
it.
Thank you.